Let's go.
Sound check, sound check, sound check, sound check, sound check, sound check. We'll be with you in a few minutes. That's pretty good, 6 meters. Uh-huh. Let's see. How's the lighting in here? How is the lighting in here?
So.
Hello, Irina. Morning. So when I got to sit down, I can sit over here briefly, right?
morning. Thank you for showing up this bright, sunny, and a little warmer day than we had the first round. Thank you for being here. As you see, standing next to us is our dear friend, our United States Ambassador to Ukraine. Ambassador, we have a much larger group in town than you see here in front of us. A lot of our people are ready for Odessa, Dnipro, and I think, I don't forget the third region, but left already because last time we had the briefing on Thursday, so of course everybody was in town. Total, if you recall, we had over 60 observers from the UCCA first round. We have about 28 this time around. So the group is a little smaller. We do also have some folks that are going to be at all four of the consulates in the United States, San Francisco, Chicago, Washington, and New York. So this is the remnants of the group that stayed in Kyiv. Some of our folks are going out. But I wanted to personally thank you, Ambassador. As I always say, I'm not going to go into the long introduction, but she's our friend. She always invites us. She always meets with us. She always openly discusses with us many issues, issues that sometimes you don't want to read about in the paper, but we have a very frank and very honest and very strong relationship. We thank you for supporting us as the UCCA. We thank you for supporting the community. Every time she comes to the United States, she tries to meet with representatives of our community. Last time in New York, she met in New York with representatives of our organization. So thank you for the cooperation. And looking for any words you have or advice for us as we observe here the second go round.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, Andy, thank you. And we believe that our relationship, the relationship of the U.S. government, first of all, but us specifically at the U.S. Embassy with UCCA is hugely important. You all have insights and relationships that we can only dream about. And we like to think that we have a little bit of value added to the important work that you do. And really, there's no more important work than coming here, observing elections. I want to thank you all for coming, your colleagues who are already out in the field, and the first group who came out. I know this is time out of your lives, you pay for it out of your own pockets, and I think it's hugely important because outside observers, foreign observers help the Ukrainian democratic process move forward. NDI polling has shown that when NDI has asked Ukrainian audience, who do you trust the most to tell you what really happened during the elections? The first individuals who are trusted the most are, no surprise, the candidate that person voted for, right? That candidate says the vote was stolen, or there were problems, or it was fabulous. The voters, that electorate believes their candidate. The other group that Ukrainian people believe trust the most to tell them what happened during the elections is all of you, foreign observers. And so you all have hugely important role to play. And I think we saw that in the last election. Nobody's saying the elections were perfect. I mean, no elections anywhere in the world are perfect. But they were improvement, and I think a step forward in Ukraine's democratic progress, which is I think what everybody wants to see. The day of elections themselves, the process was pretty good. There were mistakes, but they weren't systemic mistakes. There was no evidence of somebody saying you must do this or count in a certain way, or this is what the elections need to do. And so I think that's hugely positive. And that's what various groups, you all, NMO, NDI, IRI, OCE, ODIHR, as well as other groups said. I mean, there was a lot of criticism too, but there was also the overall judgment that the elections were pretty good and a step forward. And the other thing that I would say that was hugely important about these elections is that these truly were contested elections. For those of you who, I'm sure all of you were watching from afar, some of you probably from closer in, and nobody really knew who the two candidates were going to be that made the second round. Again, hugely important. There was no foreordained outcome, and of course now we're clear for the second round. The other thing that NDI polling can show is that as a result of the first round, that the CEC, other Ukrainian institutions like the Ministry of Interior, did a pretty good job on Sunday, March 31st. And because the judgment from all of you was that it was a pretty good outcome that reflected the will of the Ukrainian people. NBI is its own online polling has shown, they do a sample every day, has shown a clear trend upwards in confidence on the part of the Ukrainian people in the election results. In other words, they believe that the elections that have been certified by the CEC is what happens. And the second thing is that there is that same clear trend line since April 1st, the day after elections, that the CEC is doing a good job. They are a fair and impartial institution that is sticking to its role of administering elections, not deciding who will be the next winner or working for one of the candidates in a certain way. And so I think that is a real plus. I think that is a real plus of this electoral process. I'm hoping that we'll continue to see that after Sunday. Every indication that we're getting is, and we certainly hope to see this, is that the electoral process will be as good this Sunday, the 21st of April, as it was in the first round. That's what we hope to see. We could expect it to be peaceful as well. And I think that is the huge expectation, and most importantly, of the Ukrainian people, because obviously all of us want to support that. So I would just say one thing, sort of looking forward after the elections. You all are watching the polling clearly. We have said, both publicly and privately, repeatedly, that as we do with any other country, the U.S. government will work with whoever is the next president. Whoever is elected by the Ukrainian people, that is their choice, and we will work with that individual and that individual's team. And we're going to work on the same few things that the Ukrainian people have said consistently, not only in 2018, but in polling since then, that their three priorities are a just and successful end to the war in the East, prosperity in Ukraine, and the third basket of issues is really a values issue, that they want to continue the trajectory towards the West. They want to live in a rule of law society that would keep this dignity is still being enforced here in Ukraine, and we want to see that happen. We have, on the part of the U.S. government and the U.S. Embassy, in partnership with many Ukrainians, whether they're in the presidential administration, the government, the law, civil society, legal. And I will tell you honestly, I don't think Ukraine is a better friend than the United States. Since independence, and especially since 2014. And we continue to try to work with the people and the Ukrainian government on all three of those important goals. I think that is good for Ukraine, what the Ukrainian people want first and foremost, but it's also good for Ukraine. It strengthens Ukraine, it makes Ukraine more resilient. And that is a kind of partner that is a really good partner for the United States, whether it's on business, whether it's a military partner, whether it's just a partner when it comes to our goals around the world. So it's, I think, there that's really a win-win for all of us. So obviously it's going to be a very interesting time on Sunday. More interesting perhaps going forward in terms of the consolidation of a new government, whether it is a second term for President Poroshenko or a first term for Mr. Zelensky. And obviously we will continue to represent the U.S. people, all of you, here in Ukraine. And I'm just going to put in a plug. I wasn't paid to say this, but I will just say that we appreciate all of you being here. We appreciate folks coming for the first round, but we also expect it to be parliamentary election coming up. And just as all of us are exhausted from election campaign, we do hope that you, your friends, your neighbors, others who want to support the democratic Ukraine will come out for the parliamentary elections that are coming up soon as well. So on that, I'll stop.
Yeah, I just want to assure you that, we have a lot of people are coming back in October for the parliamentary elections.
Absolutely.
So our intention will be to do as big of a delegation as we can. So. Do you have a question for the ambassador?
Ambassador, first of all, groups that come here to observe in various polling small cities. We've got enough of us to get together. But I always think that villages are places where things can go awry. Do we have any information about how polling and voting goes on in villages? Do we have people, groups that investigate that?
Well, there is an organization you're familiar with called Forum, which is a Ukrainian organization started in 2014, the Orange Revolution, and has continued on. And they are great. They have a lot of credibility here in Ukraine, not just with foreign stakeholders like ourselves, but with the Ukrainian people. And they do feel a very, very large force of observers. And I haven't actually read their report, but I'm unaware that there have been, I mean, yes, mistakes, problems, no doubt. But I'm unaware of any, again, systemic kind of issues maybe in those areas. You may know that there are, remember, like 18 major observer groups were listed with, not 1,800, I think 180, excuse me. Observers were groups were listed with the CDC last time around, and in the tens of thousands of observers, most of them are Ukrainian. So there's a lot of eyes on it. Not all of those groups are, shall we say, trained and year in and year out they observe elections. Some of them have their own interests. But it's always good, when there's, usually good, when there's multiple eyes on it, because it serves as a consequence. So unaware that there are issues in the villages, although I'm sure there were in some. The other thing that I would say that is interesting about the data is that when you, and this came out about, say, 10 days ago maybe, there, obviously people have been crunching all the data, who voted for who, if they, that were left in the end, but obviously the focus will be on the top 3 or 4. And what is interesting is that Mr. Zelensky basically got a plurality. I mean, nobody won outright, but got a plurality just across the board, regionally and in every demographic group, except for mine, which is older women. So I don't know what that's about, but I mean, he got a plurality really across the board, and I think that also, kind of speaks to what to your question as well, but from a different perspective.
Are there any U.S. concerns or international concerns for the security of Ukraine after the elections? Or the views of the neighbor to the north?
I think, given the circumstances now in Ukraine, there are always concerns in the U.S. About Ukraine's security and what is happening, not only on the eastern front, in Crimea, the situation there. So we are always watching carefully. Again, I said before, we are Ukraine's best friend, and we have significant resources that we put against the security challenges that Ukraine is facing. So turning to your question, I don't think anybody knows what. First of all, I think we need to see the winner is on Sunday, Monday. But I don't think anybody knows what the reaction exactly is going to be from Russia. We have been interested, shall we say, to see that over the last 2-month period, back in the fall, I think you'll recall, all the talk was about how was Russia going to meddle in the elections and so forth. There was far less of that than I think we had expected. And so I think in a certain way, there may continue to be a wait-and-see attitude on how this is all going to work out. And that may be major Muslims need to be made, whether it's on the political side or on the security side. So what I would say is we are always watching, we are always consulting, and we are always
mentioned, that you observed that there was less Russian meddling than you had expected in the elections. How does the United States determine Russian meddling? Because Ukraine is full of Russian people who live here who aren't necessarily from Moscow. So how do you differentiate?
That's a really good question, because this is a complicated question of what does Russian meddling mean, and how does one define it exactly? When I, maybe doesn't have, lives in Ukraine, but is very pro-Russian in some way. That isn't what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking now of kind of big governmental moves, whether it is a kinetic military move, whether it is a coordinated disinformation campaign. And when I say that we saw less than we were expecting, it's not that disinformation stopped in Ukraine or in the US or anywhere else. That continues as kind of the new norm, shall we say, in terms of trying to shape the narrative of what's going on and how we think about it, creating confusion, et cetera. I mean, that continues, but not to the level that we had expected new narratives and so forth. Cyber attacks, we weren't sure whether the CEC was going to get really big attacks, or perhaps other elements of Ukrainian infrastructure. Ukraine remains the only country and the first country that has had its electricity grid taken twice by the Russians. That's obviously a different way of doing things, but no less effective. So far, we haven't seen that, but we continue obviously to be alert to these things. So how do we determine that? Again, we're not infallible, despite what you see on TV. I wish we were. But first of all, like everybody else, we look at the news, all the different elements of news and social media now, of course, and everything else. What are people saying? What are they talking about? Secondly, so it's, there's, I wish I could tell you there was a science and it's 100%. Yes, that is certainly our hope.
I know you got other places to go, other points to see, so once again, your presence here, like it was last go around, is important for these people who, as you know, volunteer their time, who pay for their own expenses coming here, who've done this, repeatedly. So the fact that you're here and being able to speak with them and also think that from the U.S. government side is very important. So thank you for coming. Maybe we'll run into you. Are you staying in
Yeah,
Cave?
in and around here. So if I see you, come up to me if I don't immediately recognize you, and let me know what you're seeing. I would just say, not to go on and on and on, but I would just say that I'm just personally kind of impressed on March 31st, because when we went to the precincts, people kind of welcomed us. They said, please sign in here. Do you have any questions? Would you like to go over here? Do you want to talk to this observer or whatever? It was super normal, no defensiveness, which was in contrast even to when I was here. I started observing here in Ukraine in the early 2000s, even to the 2014 elections when I was down in Berdiansk, where people were nervous. Why are foreigners here? And what kind of questions? And why do you need to know when the next meeting of the TAC is? There was none of that. Which again created confidence that there was nothing to hide. It was really good, and I hope that's what you all see next time too.
Yep. Well, we plan to, as always, have a press conference on. We have 2 time slots at 10 o'clock on Monday as well 2 o'clock. So depending on when OSC goes, to be very honest, so we're going to see which we fit in. But as always, we'll share with you our analysis, our reports, and I'll be in touch with you like I always do.
Good. That's great. Thank you very much once again for coming to
Sure. You know what? Let's take a picture with the ambassador. Okay? Why don't we all step up here?
Did they even hear that?
No, thank you. Okay, the sooner we start, the sooner we get to leave.
We could just say we did the briefing and pretend.
Well, everybody here is totally unseasoned. Nobody's done this before, so we're gonna probably be here for a long time, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm
I'm not trying to Brogart in his picture, but I have the microphone.
microphone and we're on live. So
Yeah.
other people actually are watching us via
YouTube.
So we're doing an online training. We're doing an online training as well. I am not going to go through. Welcome again. I am not going to go through all the history here in terms of what we normally do in terms of who we are, why we're here, and all that. Everybody knows why we're here. But I do want to recognize right off from the very top and thank 4 individuals. Tamara Alexei, who is not here with us today, but she's kind of the person who coordinated all this, and I don't know how she did it in terms of all the emails she exchanged with everybody and prepared everything. So I want to personally thank Tamara for doing this. Reno, of course, is our guy here in Cave, who's developed with his Sterling School and his folks developed
And
an
system.
system.
With RTM.
That's right, them, and of course Vika and Ira, who just left, who are our organizers here. Yaku, Vika, to our staff and to our people here, we would not be successful if they weren't around. Secondly, again, to you, thank you for spending the time, making the commitment to democracy, to Ukraine, spending your own money, your own resources, but also the time that you're doing here. So thank you for being here. I'm not going to go through the code of conduct. Everybody knows the code of conduct. I'm not going to read through it all. Again, you're all seasoned. You understand it. Be mindful again of media attention that you may be getting, especially because of the 2 candidates. Please be careful in reserving your comments about the candidates themselves. Keep your comments to the process itself, the election process. After you go home, that you can say anything you want. But if you are asked by any media in any part of the country you're traveling, please stick to the process. And so that's why we don't get into any issues. Besides that, as I always say, have fun doing this. I think the people, as the ambassador said, the people, the committees now, the local commissions, they're a lot friendlier. They're a lot more organized folks. Don't be afraid to engage them. Have fun doing this process and enjoy yourself. So with that being said, before your little guy walks in here.
Our youngest observer.
Your youngest observer, Remo, not Reno, but Remo.
Yeah.
Reno's son. But I will turn it over to Reno.
Relatively new.
Who's going to go through a quick briefing session to explain some of the intricacies, and also then once again to go through our online system. The one thing I wanted to talk about is that our online system worked really well.
I think so.
For the first go around. We had how many reports?
739.
We had 739 reports from our observers.
Total.
So we had some very good data. The one thing I'm sure Reno will mention to you, but on the online system, some people had difficulties in terms of hitting the submit button and having the application or your forms go through. You have to answer every single question. So even if there's asked you for description, put NA, non-applicable, or put no. If you don't put in some kind of mark or some type of letter into each slot, it won't accept the form. That's a little technicality or a little issue that we have.
That's not quite right, Andre. You don't have to put in anything in the written. No, but you have to answer every yes, no question. Okay. Every dialogue button has to have an answer. And we're developing it, and thanks to Artyom, he's done a lot of volunteer work for the organization as much as anybody.
Yep.
And we'll probably try to add features that'll prevent us or give us a quicker feedback. Where did you miss? Because now you've got to physically look on the form to find out which one you missed.
I want to mention to his presentation and that's you up, but I just wanted to bring that particular point up. So with that, Reno, why don't you begin with the briefing?
Thank you very much, Andre. It's so good to see so many of you that I know so well from previous election observation missions. It's a real testament to the spirit of Americans, and it's a testament to the spirit of Ukrainian Americans that there's such commitment to continue to help build democracy in this country. It's inspiring to me. I think it's inspiring to everybody that's been involved, and we greatly appreciate all the work that UCCA does and allows me to do because I really enjoy the work we do, and I think we do make a difference. As Andrei pointed out, in round one, between UCCA and the Ukrainian World Congress, we had 739 submissions, including openings, PECs, and closings. And that is a statistically significant number of observations. How many of you did observe round one? Right. So if you're a round one observer, you saw and you did attend the debriefing, basically, we had 95% plus ratings of either good or very good. So statistically speaking, that is almost perfect. So there were incidents, there were things that happened, but in general, the election was confirmed not just by UCCA, but by the other organizations who did observe in the same level of statistical confidence. Again, we don't have the numbers of observers this time, and we don't know. Do we have colleagues from World Congress observing as well?
We do. They're here. They may be online, but I don't think we have any.
We don't have anybody here.
Today.
And as Andrei also said, we had very good results with the tool. We've made a lot of progressions with it. I think this is the fourth iteration of our observation tool. And we take your feedback very seriously. All the feedback we got from the debrief, we will try to incorporate, assuming we're going to do the parliamentaries, which may be sooner than we think. We never know when they will be. And we will try to put those features into the process. I'm not going to go through the slideshow that we did on the first briefing. I think most of you are experienced. You know what elections look like. I do want to focus on how the forum operates and just a few other technical details. You raised a very good question about the Russian disinformation point of view. I did want to remind everybody that the World Congress also did a disinformation monitoring mission in addition to their observation mission. I haven't seen the results that they have gathered, but I know that they also used a tool that we helped develop for them. We actually did develop for them, that they monitored all the media around the world. So that was another way that we paid a lot of attention to what kinds of outside interference were coming in. And I mean, there was bias in the media from one point of view or another, but I don't think anybody concluded that there was anything that was really systematic. The second thing I'd like to stress is that our data also showed that we had a relatively safe election environment, as the ambassador pointed out. Things have changed a lot from when we did it years ago, when we were not so welcome, when we were almost viewed as interlopers. And in this election, people kind of gotten the picture, and I've seen this really throughout the post-Soviet space. As election missions continue to operate, people get more used to seeing observers. They begin to understand our role, and they appreciate our role when we stick to it. Andrei mentioned the code of conduct. We do take it very seriously. He takes it very seriously. The organization takes it very seriously. But in order to be respected as observers, it's very important that we put aside any of our own personal opinion regarding this election or what we may think people have seen. We are observers. We're simply a mirror. You can only report what you saw. You can report that people told you something happened, but you can't verify what you didn't see. So how does the mission work? Our process essentially is a snapshot is taken of a polling station when we visit. That snapshot should be approximately 30 minutes in length, give or take. And your observation consists of what you saw in that time frame. Obviously, if you come across something very dramatic, there's a disturbance, and you're there for a longer period of time, you will observe more things. But you cannot observe what you think people have told you. and of course, your experience. You've been involved. People will come up to you. People will try to influence your opinion. If you use the form will lead you right through the questions as they need to be discussed and they need to be reported, and it'll bring you to the conclusions that you need to have. You raised the question about Wi-Fi connectivity. Wi-Fi in Ukraine is widespread. 4G in all of the metropolitan areas is now widespread. It's very inexpensive. Wi-Fi generally free if you find a cafe, and you should find some. You're going to find them several times during the day. You're going to want coffee. You're going to want tea. You're going to want to take a break. And your online forms will be submitted when you have connectivity. The key is not to close the form and lose it. So keep your forms open. Just open a new tab. That's the safest approach. Don't close it, and then you might have to re-enter that data. Artyom, do you want to add anything to that?
No, not really.
That's correct.
I just can add that it's possible to submit something, and if for some reason during your submission your internet is missing, and later when you will have internet again, your submission will get to the server. So it will try to send in the background while you don't have connectivity, and when you have it, it will reach the server.
And you will receive a message that your form was submitted. So if you don't get the message that the form was submitted, it was not. So the chances of you losing your data are very low. We had very few technical problems, especially with the UCCA observers. And the reason for that is that the UCCA observers attended the training. And the training, not that I'm a dramatic trainer, it just gives us everybody the roadmap about how to use the tool. What we did experience was when observers who had not attended the training didn't realize things like they had to answer every question or how to appropriately enter the information. What is the difference between us and an OSCE? You're here on your own dime. You're here for this brief briefing, and it's very difficult for us to make sure that everybody does everything exactly the same way. If we had a 2-day briefing and we spend a lot of time practicing on the tool and how you enter your name, it's a lot easier for us to aggregate the data. But when people enter the time one way and somebody else enters the time another way, then we can't really sort that data as well as we would like. Yes.
How often do you want that data to be coming in? Is it every 5 precincts, every 2 hours, or do we submit it all together at the end of the day?
That's a great question. One of the beauties of our system is that Andre and the core team can access the data in real time all day long. So ideally, when you finish the observation, you can submit that form either before you leave the room, or as soon as you get back to the car, or as soon as you get to a hotspot in any of those situations.
Where do we get the forms?
You're going to get them in a minute. For us, it's better to have it regularly throughout the day. I mean, once you fill it out, once you're in the polling station and you fill out all the information, basically you're done. All you got to do is hit submit. And as long as you've got 3G, 4G, even 2G, I think, right?
Yeah,
Even 2G will work. So as long as you've got any, hard to avoid in this country. It's one of the, I mean, it's.
And it's important because I will get calls during the day from media or some, how's it going, what are your people seeing? So if there is something happening out there that
Online are
is
asking to
disturbing,
restate the
whatever.
question.
For myself and for the other court members and team to have the data, because you're the ones who give us the data. I mean, without your data, I got nothing, I have nothing to talk about.
You're saying if there's an issue at a particular precinct, and we submit that, you can always go in there and see that somebody else from OSHA, if that same issue might be happening with them.
Yeah, and I've been asked by the people who are online to repeat the question because they can only hear us. The question is, how often should you submit the data? And the basic answer is that the beauty of our system is that our information comes in real time. The core team can see our results in real time. that's actually better than any other organization who's doing observation in this country. And I'm going to say one more thing about data. You'd be surprised how consistent it is. The data we get early in the day is pretty much consistent with what happens the rest of the day. Now, we have been involved in missions where the bottom falls out somewhere along the line, so don't be surprised. But try to enter your submissions as quickly as possible when you finish the observation. You and then you.
Yes, I just wanted to add to it, what I found was successful with Daryl and myself in the last observation. We would go to 3 or 4 and then take a coffee break and sit down. I was translating. He was taking notes. And then we submitted everything that we had, like 3 or 4 of them. And then we went on again. So we managed to do, I think, 17 precincts in the day.
Really get a picture. And again, obvious. Considering this, one point I'm going to make is that 2 days after the election, when we did the briefing, we had 725 submissions. Then a week later, this number went to 739. Something wrong there. There's no reason to be submitting these 3-4 days after the observation. I'm a little suspect of any data that comes in that late. Again, that can be because we don't have access to every observer and we can't control the training of every observer. So please do complete this. Ideally, will not be so difficult this time. It's only 2 candidates. They don't have to count 39. They're only going to be counting 2 people. Last experience we had with this was when it was Timoshenko and Yanukovych, and we were done in 2 hours. I mean, if they can count, they can do this relatively quickly. Yes.
So I have a question, and this is based on past experience. I understand that the data that we're submitting is very important, and you do a lot of analysis based on that data. But we also, in the past, we've always been hooked up with like Opara or other people when we get on the ground. When we saw something go wrong, we called our Opara partners and saying, "This is what we're seeing. Force what we've seen." Are we still doing that? Are we working with the other organizations?
Here, the question was, how do we interface with civil society observations from in-country like Opora, and what is their relationship with us vis-a-vis the election process, observation process? There will be a lot of observers from civil society and political parties in your polling stations. Round 1, there's going to be more of them than there is of you, and you certainly will have the opportunity to interface with them. If you see something dramatically happening wrong, please contact the court team. You can either call me or you can call Andre, preferably Andre, because he's mission chief. Let him, we'll sort it out. But if you're coming across something that's really dramatic, and maybe we probably should talk about that, our #1 priority regarding the observation mission is your safety and my safety and everybody else's safety. We're not heroes. We're not here to be, I don't want a monument to observers who died in the line of action. So something that you need to get yourself out of the way from, get away. You can always call, and if there's something security related, Andre knows how to contact the people at the embassy. I know how to get them. The ambassador was just here. We are not policemen. We are not missionaries. We are election observers. We observe and we report. And we are not to be the story. The story of this election is the citizens of Ukraine who are voting and making their choice of their destiny. We're here to help them authenticate the validity or non-validity of the election process. Is it fair, free, and transparent, or is it not? That is the standard. In round 1, there were many civil society observers, as well as exit pollers. And our reporting of incidents was less than 2%. Less than 2%, which is almost negligible. I mean, again, with 729, and I think it's consistent with what we heard from other missions. So very good question. Your security is #1. Your safety is #1. And we want you to take care of yourself. That's most important. Yes, sir.
When you're in the first
Maybe Andre can say something to that, but from our point of view, nothing.
The only thing that some of our observers raised were that, I think it was Ypres and someplace else, that the law enforcement, the local police, was demanding to take pictures of observers' passports, their credentials and their passports.
And badges.
How do we respond to that? Do we allow them?
Well, I don't think we ever got a straight answer from the ministry whether or not that's allowable. It's not, I mean, it's not a practice that they endorse, they talk about. But, if you don't, then, they're not, the police won't let you in, wouldn't let you into the precinct. What I would do, tell me, Reno, if you agree with me, is I would report it. I would leave that, but I would leave that precinct, but I would report it so that we know that, then we can call, report it to me, report it to Reno. I'll call the Ministry of Internal Affairs and we'll let them know that the police are asking for take photographs of the. I had that situation, believe it or not, even in Ternopil, from the opening. And so I turned around and said, okay, fine. So let me take a picture of your badge. And she, oh, no. And then she, so she, and then she ran away and that was it. That's how I go.
Yeah, if I could just repeat the question for the people who are listening. The question was, Andre was mentioning that any police were asking to photograph our credentials and our passports. And he gave you the answer.
As a follow-up, I remember in years past,
Yeah. You're supposed to sign. You're supposed to sign in. Some you'll see they're so used to it they'll just take your credentials. Some ask for the passport as well. I mean that's something that they can ask for. So
That was a follow-on question, basically about whether our credentials can be copied and so on. Let me just add something in from my perspective. When my impression from this election, both as an observer and as doing this task of training, is that this country was very concerned about security in this election. Very concerned. How many people in security were out? 135,000?
130. We had a briefing from the Minister of Internal Affairs. There were 130 law enforcement.
30,000.
130,000 out in precincts the first go round.
To do anything, but none of our observers felt harassed. Nobody felt harassed. I mean, we didn't have any report like that. Data shows that there were no statistically significant incidents where mobile voter numbers were out of range.
Hundreds. This term, you'll find 5 to 10. That's all. I mean, the number is dramatically low in terms of the mobile requests.
And in an extension of that answer, there still isn't a very easy process for people to vote absentee. They still haven't been able to figure that part out, and for obvious reasons. There is a process where people can change their voting station. I understand, and Judge Fateh is nodding, that up to 300,000 people have requested formally to change their place of registration. I don't know what the CEC, I have no idea what they've done with that. So it's possible that people have gone through the process of going to the Central Election Commission, submitting your documents, getting the right to a vote in another station. But I don't know about what that really.
Let me mention this. We have not had a briefing from the Minister of Internal Affairs this time around. We did have from the first round. There were 2 things that he pointed out just for our observers to be cognizant of. One is that they expected some of the carouseling to go around. And so not only pay attention to what's going inside, but when you get there, take a walk around, take a look around in the surroundings. I mean, that was one thing that they said that they were suspecting could happen. Now, we didn't see any of that. We didn't report on it. I don't think anybody.
Our reporting on carousel voting was so low that it wouldn't show up on a pie chart.
And the other thing that he, not to scare anybody, but he said that there are going to be so many hoaxes in terms of possible bomb threats, that assume that it is, and if you get one, get out there. But again, a lot of that, he suspected that whatever occurred, 99% of it is a hoax. It's people just trying to disrupt,
Yes, sir. We have one question online. You want to follow up on that? That's good.
One question from viewer. The question is, if we see something illegal, do we call the police or do we suggest the commission to call the police?
The question was, if they see something something illegal, observers, do we call the police or do we let somebody else call the police? If you're observing, and you're observing what you consider to be illegal election practices, your job is to note that in the form and submit that information to us. If you think it rises to the level that we need to take some other kind of action, then you need to call either myself or Andre, and the core team will handle that from that point forward. Under no circumstances are you to call the police unless your life is in danger or you're in some kind of serious danger yourself. That's when you would call the police. We are not policemen. We're not arbiters. We're not judges of this election. We're not referees. Don't get in the middle of this. We don't want to be the story. We are to stay inside of our role, which is a mirror, report the incident. If it's dangerous, as Andre just said, if it involves something like a bomb threat, you get yourself out of there and go to another polling station, call us, report it. We'll deal with the embassy. They have the resources. We have no resources that will allow us to help you or anybody else get out of a difficult situation, except the embassy. So your best friends in country are the policemen at the polling station, because in general, they were trying to do their job. Our observation was that the police were there. They were there in significant numbers. Every station had them. There was also a safety officer at every polling station. And this was something that probably we weren't familiar with. A safety officer from the city was responsible that every polling station had fire protection, had a bucket of water full, had some sand, some tools, and that the arrangement was supposed to be safe. The polling station where I opened was a OSHA nightmare. I mean, literally, I don't know how we wound up there, but it had lumber hanging on the safe, and I can show you the photos. It'll be great for the parliamentary election. But the safety officer made sure the bucket was full of water. So if water would have helped when the lumber fell on somebody, then it would have been a good thing. But it probably would not have.
Just to follow up on that online question, you will see people registering what they call representatives of the political party or candidate. It's not observers. So please stay out. As Reno said, put it on your form. You observe it. You think it's really critical. You report it to us, but do not raise it with either the local police or the commissioners.
And while you raise that question, there are only two cases in which you sign anything. One is to sign in your registration at the PEC. The other is to sign for a protocol. Other than that, you do not sign anything. You don't sign complaints. You don't authenticate anybody else's complaint. You don't become a party to anything. You need not sign the control sheet. You may be invited to because that was an old practice. It's not required by law at the PEC. And you only sign when you ask for a protocol. Those are the two cases in which your signature should be used. Everything else, please stay out of it.
I just want to make sure, for example, in the past, as an example, I'll use this, if the urns weren't sealed, we were allowed, if I would photograph the urn, and they would come up and say, like, what are you photographing? We were allowed at that time to state to the head of the area that the urns are not sealed, and so then they would either say, oh, that's the protocol that only one side needs to be sealed, and point like not even allowed to do that or should not be doing that.
It's a very good question. Her question was, if we see something that's a technical violation, like the urn not being sealed, which is pretty important, should we Deputy Chair, Secretary, one of the PEC members. Doing this a long time. I use politeness to get my point across because, again, we're guests here, essentially. Shouldn't there be a seal over there? And you can bring it up that way. Again, I've watched some observers here who have very rudely created a lot of tension in a room every political party had a right to appoint a PEC member to the commission to begin with. And we'll discuss that as we go through the form. But in general, they're trying to do their job. We've had very little evidence of any problems in the first round. Doesn't mean we won't have them this round, because this is for the money, right? This one's for the whole ball of wax. So we don't know what we'll confront. That's why we're doing the mission. Otherwise, we didn't need to be here. But politeness and asking questions are certainly in order. You can always ask a question.
You had a follow-up on carousel?
I'm sorry.
Outside and mingle.
The question is, how do you identify carouseling? It's not very easy to catch people doing that. I mean, first of all, we're not catchers, we're observers. So it's not easy to observe. Ballot stuffing sometimes is not easy to observe. Generally, the clues for carouseling is when you see some very nervous voters. They just look like they're not quite in the same frame of mind as everybody else in that room. They come in, they go get their ballot. They've already got one in their pocket. They don't like to mingle. Their eyes. I mean, it's just like anybody else who's doing something sneaky. When my son tries to take a donut off of the table that he's not supposed to get, he tries to avert my eyes somewhere else, and then the quick hand goes and gets it. So you just have to pay attention and see if you see a pattern. If you see voters who look like that coming in, going out, coming in, going out, it's not easy to catch, but unless it's widespread, it can't be significant. So if it's so pervasive, I think it would become clear to you.
And then what do you do?
Put it on the form.
But how, I mean, if you observe a natural behavior of the voters, you take a photo of that.
I have.
If you-
Yes.
Close enough.
Yeah, we're talking about carousel voting again, so the people online know. And that goes back to your question. Photograph anything that way. When people say, "Oh, you can't shoot," I said, "Listen, I can shoot anything," and I do. I shoot hundreds. And
So basically, you could also photograph the legs of people in the ballot.
I have plenty of photos like that. They're pretty interesting.
So we did, for my very first election, we did see a carousel. We had two individuals, one person stayed on the inside, one person just sat on the outside on a bench and sat and watched how people were leaving, and had people leaving and going to the same person that was hanging out outside that wasn't a pollster. Minutes while somebody was on the
I through the door. Take a look. Is there a card into the car? I mean, I always do before I even walk into the precinct.
During the first round, I was asked by voters where their best station is. Am I allowed to say this?
The question is, if a voter asks you to, and sometimes the polling stations, as you know, are co-housed. Again, the only people who can speak on behalf of the mission, in this case, is Andre. He is the mission chief. I will not comment on the conduct of the election myself. So I'm under the same rules as you are, where I'm an observer from the time this ends this morning until we come back, I guess, right? So the only people who speak on behalf of the mission is the mission chief.
Okay, let's go through the forms.
Yes, let's go through the form because this will lead us to some other questions, which means we need a projector, which means I should take my tea away, which means I may also need my glasses.
Now it's getting brighter.
Yes. The hotel promised us that the lighting in the room would improve as this is the address for the tool. It's really pretty simple. No www, just https://ucca.sbs-ua.com. During the debrief, people, all the observers, you'll be under greater control. But right now, it's an open tool. Yeah, that's a good idea. Take a picture of it, and then you'll have it. You can open as many of these as you need. You know, the hero here had 17 observations. That's really quite a few. I don't know how you did that.
Started 6 o'clock, 7
Well, we all did, but it's depends on where you are. In urban areas, you can do a lot more. Yeah, in urban areas, you can do a lot more.
We had like 3 in one building.
Yeah, so when you get 3 in one building, it's very good for observer statistics. Everybody good? Yes. So, and again, we'll come back. We'll put this back up again if you didn't get it. But ucca.sbs-ua.com. Mhm. So if you did the first round, you'll see exactly the same form. And we,
For some reason, it doesn't show the part picture.
I don't know why.
Okay.
Only shows parts, yeah? So this is where you start. Basically, you choose your language. The operative language for the UCCA is English. We included Ukrainian this time for the Ukrainian World Congress. And then you'll have a choice of a form. Please show them how that works, yeah? So English, you can choose Ukrainian, but we work in English here. Next. And then you have 3 choices on forms. You can choose an opening form, a polling station form, or a closing form. You can only submit one opening form, and then it will be locked to you. You can only submit one closing form, and then it'll be locked to you. But you can open an indefinite number of polling station forms. So again, we tried to tailor the information. Let's look at the opening form if we can. Again, we are cooperating with the World Congress. So the first question is your name. We would prefer that every observer team, and we trust that everybody's observing as a team. This is important for security, for your security and security to mission. So it should be at least 2 observers in a team. I'm not against 3 because we have an uneven deployment in this case. It should be your last names. Last name hyphen last name. Domenico hyphen Fute. And we would appreciate if you do that. Again, it helps us sort the data a little bit later on in the day. Then, obviously, we're at UCCA. The oblast is wherever you are, Lviv, Odessa, Kiev, wherever you happen to be. Type of station, urban, suburban, rural, you make this judgment. I think you understand these terms. If somebody has a question, please do not hesitate. The decks are all 3, the District Election Commission, the decks, they're all 3-digit numbers. And I believe that will be on our information. Is that correct, Vika? Somebody ask her. They have the polling station information. They will receive it today.
Yeah, everybody who.
Very good.
But the deck number is when you walk into the precinct.
Yes.
You got the sign there.
It says the deck and the
It's
PEC.
got the deck number.
And the PEC.
number.
Yeah.
Okay,
The
the answer was that on the list that we have, we don't have.
They don't have the deck information. Okay, very good.
Because they're still being finalized today.
The decks?
Yeah, the number, the actual number for the PEC, not the deck. That's what Nika said. The reason they don't have PEC numbers today is because in the central thing, they're still finalizing the PEC number.
There must be some revisions.
So the question then to answer is, with the decks and the PECs, is as we walk in on a formal.
There's a sign on the door.
The door.
There's a sign on the door.
It's got both the deck number and the PEC number.
And I forgot what color are they? What color were those signs? Green and white? White with blue letters, yes. See? white with blue letter signs. They're pretty big. They're like 1 meter by 1 meter. So district election commission is 1 to 3 digits.
Sometimes they call it district electoral commission, but in Ukrainian, more often they call it territorial electoral.
Right. Official terminology, yeah, it depends on how you interpret it. PEC is always 6 digits. Polling station, precinct election commission. Time of our visit, when did the team arrive? We're asking everybody to use a 24-hour clock for time. This is where we did have some difficulty. Again, we would like to be able to sort our data and aggregate it well. So if somebody puts 9 a.m. and then they get to 1 o'clock and they put 1 p.m. and everybody else is doing 1300, it becomes a little bit difficult. What time did you arrive? Excuse me. For opening, ideally you're there at 7 o'clock. They're supposed to be there at 7 o'clock. You should be there at 7 o'clock. It is about an hour's worth of work to get a polling station up and running correctly. So that is the time we should start our observation in the morning. What time did the PEC begin official procedures to open the station? That's another good question, because they should start at 7, but they may not start till 7:15. They may not start till 7:30. If they don't start at 7:30, they're never going to open on time. What time did the polling station actually open? We did have some variation in our data on this. Generally, 70% of the polling stations opened on time. This means that roughly 30% of them opened later. Were they significantly later? Not many. 8:05, 8:11, 8:15. Question?
An observation. Last time we were in Depaul, at the opening, there was a tremendous amount of dragging their feet. They didn't get the polls till 9, and you can tell. I mean, it's obvious that they, were very discriminately looking at the thing and, signing very slow and all that.
The comment from the questioner was, in the past, they've observed some dilatory behavior by PECs, like deliberately not trying to get the station open on time. We didn't have a lot of that in this case, as she has mentioned, but that would be a significant violation. It'd have to be noted. To me, that would not be a good opening. If they don't open till 9 o'clock, that's bad.
A lot of people walk away.
Sure, you lose a lot of voters. Number of voters registered. This is the total number registered for that precinct commission. As you all know, or you should know, or probably know from the past, voter registration in Ukraine is passive, is continuously updated based on registration at the House. So there is no voter registration process like we have in the US. So that number is finite. Yes?
Are you allowed this time to handwrite in late registrants, or at what time, at what time?
My understanding, and maybe Andre has something else, is that the lists are closed 48 hours before the election.
So there should be no handwritten additions at the end of that list.
I don't know if they can write them in 48 hours before, but there should be none on election day.
Right, not on election day.
There's no emergency procedure to add a voter to a precinct.
Well, basically what I'm asking is, can they be handwritten in there? Because a lot of, we have seen them being there's lists that are all typewritten, and then usually at the end they put this X, but then we see maybe 20 names handwritten in.
I did not see this in this election. We've had no observation report about that. That is handwritten names added to the voter list. I did not see this in this election. I know what you're talking about. And my understanding is that election list is locked 48 hours before the election, which means today. And in this case, they will not be adding any names. They're printed. I would not expect that. If you see something like that, that would be worth noting. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in years past, we did know on Saturday when we did our
Reconnoiter.
that they would be adding names on Saturday.
They should not be adding names on a Saturday. Yeah, my understanding is that is not the case. One of the things that did come up, it's a very good question about number of voters in this registration, so the form is useful to go through. One of the difficulties we did observe on election day, one of the problems that did take place again, to some degree, there were discrepancies between the voter registration list and voters' expectations. People who voted in a certain precinct many times found out that their name wasn't there. Children who were registered to vote and came back to vote for some reason, were away at school and came back, their names were not there. So there were some incidents of that, enough that it was significantly noted in our report. So the lists, they did many, many things well. They still need to work on their lists. And that was in your report, I believe. Yes?
I mean, there were certain people were turned away because they said they voted there for 20 years or 10 years. And for some reason, they weren't on the list, so they had to file an opt or whatever.
Yeah, so there were problems with the lists. Not really bad, but they were there. Was the polling station difficult to find? And that is it in a very remote place? Is it hidden in the middle of the building where people can't find it easily? Those kinds of things. These are judgment calls that you would have to make. Was physical access to the station difficult? We had significant amounts of yes. And this country still has a long way to go in terms of access for disabled, or just access, period. I mean, okay, I'm not 16 anymore, but I really didn't enjoy going up 3 flights of stairs to find a polling station that could have been somewhere else, or should have been somewhere else. So I think accessibility of polling stations is something you should still be noting. To me, accessibility means, can that 70-year-old pensioner easily access this station? Not the 20-year-old kid leaping up the stairs. I mean, I understand he can and she can. But can the average citizen easily get to that polling station? And in many cases, that was something we observed as being still a problem.
But, can I say something to that?
Sure.
We had that, they had, that it was accessible. They had a picture of a wheelchair in one of the stalls, but there was no way to get to the second floor.
Right.
So, that was one issue. But then when we asked, they said, well, if they can't get there, that's what the mobile things are for.
I mean, the mobile box is for people who are sick or infirm, but the average 70-year-old doesn't necessarily consider himself sick or infirm.
Right.
But he's not a mountain climber anymore either. These polling stations really should be on the ground floor. Yeah, yeah. So I think accessibility is something. I mean, what good are we doing if we don't report what really is the case? And that's, I think, helpful to the country, because I don't, in many cases, I saw personally polling stations that could have been located somewhere else in that building, certainly on the ground floor. Because what good is it to have a picture of a wheelchair being able, if you get it up to the 3rd floor.
This is probably just a minor thing, but we've also seen where they had wheelchair accessibility, and they did have a ramp going up. And we've seen polling stations where the booths have been built for wheelchair accessibility, but then we've also been to polling areas where there was a ramp, but yet the wheelchair could not fit into the booth because the booth was still a standard size.
Yeah, so those are accessibility questions that we need to answer. Intimidation of voters. Voters are not being intimidated when they're asked for their ID. Every voter must present an ID. That's not intimidation. Intimidation is if you see groups of people discouraging voters from voting, making it difficult for voters to vote, disrupting the process. That's what we're looking for there. General agitation and disturbance. Again, people arguing because they're cranky in the morning, that's not a disturbance. It's just people being cranky. Yes, sir.
On the ID, in the past, some of the, say, party observers or whoever they were, would turn and ask for, did they see our ID? And I understand that, we show it to them, and I understand we can ask other observers to see their ID.
Yes, and we're going to get to that question. The question is about, do we allow others to see our ID? Which is, the answer is yes, because we're here as a public, we're here publicly. And are we allowed to find out what are the observer status of other observers? And the answer to that is yes as well.
And
No, you don't have to show your passport to an observer. You should show your passport at the sign-in. Yeah, they're not able to. They should not access your passport. Hold on to your guys. Campaign posters and materials. It is still the law here that every candidate's placard should be there on the wall. This is the standard Central Election Commission propaganda. In this case, it should be 2. First election, it was 39. Some of them had to go on the ceiling. So, yeah, it was quite a decoration. But in this case, there should be 2. That is not campaign poster and material. We're talking about partisan campaign poster and material. Voters may come in with a pin or something that identifies them as being for somebody. That's not a violation. Is there anybody campaigning in the polling station at 7 o'clock in the morning? I'm just hoping they're working. But if you see it, then you report it. Very important question. How many members of the PEC? The quorum for a PEC, the quorum, is 9. In rural and small polling stations, it can be as few as 4. But it still requires that there be a chair, deputy, and secretary. Those are the 3 officials.
Right, so 9 in a city.
9 in a urban area. In very few stations. In other words, I'm assuming this is somewhere deep in the Carpathian Mountains where there's 50 voters on a list in a village that has. Yeah, you can have very small ones. But in general, the general rule is that a quorum of the commission is 9. In the first round, every presidential candidate had the ability to nominate a PEC member. Now, I don't think the PECs have been reorganized. So theoretically, there could have been 39 PEC members in a PEC. Most of the candidates, half of those candidates didn't have the capacity to do that. So the number of PEC members that we were encountering varied from 11 to 17. So don't be surprised if a PEC is larger than 9. But the minimum for a quorum is 9. For them to open, they need 9. If they don't have 9, they've got to get permission from the DEC to open without a quorum, which means a DEC representative would have to show up, and you would have found yourself in a bad polling station.
They have to be all present there.
They have to be there, yes. Yeah. As the day goes on, they don't have to have them all there at one time, but they have to be there for the opening and they have to be there for the closing. Domestic representatives of party candidates, certainly you're going to have reps of these 2 candidates, certainly. Domestic observers, there were lots, as we said, Apura. What's the other organization, Andre? Apura and somebody else. Committee of Concerned. Yeah. So there will be domestic observers. There can be media representatives. Certainly there were exit pollers. They were doing a nice job. The question about security forces. This became a little bit of a confusion in the first round. We'll take responsibility for that, and we're going to rephrase this in the future. Every polling station had 2 or 3 police persons, plus the safety officer. We do not consider them to be security forces. This question really harkens back to the days when security forces may have been a disruptive force. We're talking about, has some militia group come? The police are supposed to be there. They're there to protect you and that polling station. The safety officer is required to be there now. He wears a nice city jacket, and he or she spends most of the day smoking and drinking coffee. But security forces to us are some unusual group of people, not police, not the safety officer. Some other people showing up, especially armed, or thugs, or some kind of unofficial militia. That's what we're looking for there. Same question with unauthorized people. Are there people there without credentials? Which goes back to the gentleman's question. You have the right to look at anybody's credential. In first round, I had one experience. Went into a polling station, did the right thing, signed myself in, etc. And I started to photograph, and a very large person came over to me and put his hand in front of my camera. And I answered him in English immediately. I said, listen, I can photograph anything I want here. And as soon as he heard English, he paused. And then I asked, maybe 10 minutes later, after he calmed down a little bit, where he was from, and he was flummoxed. He couldn't remember what political party had appointed him. And then he pointed to the secretary, and she looked at him like he was crazy. And she said, you know what political party you're appointed from. And he goes, oh, yeah, I remember now. I don't remember what party was it. Well, you? It doesn't make any difference.
I don't remember, I think he didn't want to tell.
Yeah, of course he didn't want to tell. I know that.
When we check, but when we ask for their IDs, how do we know what is a valid ID and what is not a valid ID? Exactly, we've seen journalists that come sometimes, and you can see that they're like makeshift IDs that they, made themselves on some kind of Xerox.
That's not valid. That's not valid.
What really is?
Observers' IDs look like what Judge Foutte has on right now, and you know what that looks like, right? The observers' IDs, I would have to look at a photo to remember what they look like.
Some of them I think were more on paper than on laminated kind of card.
But there's not one general,
No.
so photographer, journalists,
Pictures of them.
journalists, for example, I mean, we have no idea what.
Where it's not for the entire country. I mean, every newspaper will have their own, or school.
No, I think there's a media credential.
So there's a media credential.
Yeah, there's a media credential. If you give me when we take a break or when we get done, I'll take a quick look and I'll be able to tell you.
Yeah, because I just, for example, we had you live at all places, but nothing. We had 3 young men walk around with media credentials, and as soon as, but the commissions asked for their passports, they would not supply the passports, so the kids took off. I mean, so there were some folks walking around, with basic credentials. One question.
We have an online question.
Are observers from a different party allowed to be at the polling stations? For example, during the first round, there was an observer who claimed to be from a party of Odessa Mayor Trukhanov.
If they have a credential, they can be at the polling station. If they were, the question is who can be at a polling station? Unauthorized people are people without credentials. Again, all the political parties were able to appoint observers in the first round. I think their credentials are still valid.
Yeah.
Just like yours was still valid if you were here on the first round. So it's theoretically, it's not impossible that observers from candidates that are no longer running will be there with credentials. Don't be surprised. Was the polling station overcrowded? Sometimes it depends on the size of the station. Again, where I opened in this particular case, it was overcrowded from the time 3 people got there. Was there campaigning inside the station? That's a redundant question. We'll fix it again. And was there campaign material inside the station? Again, we're talking about partisan political material, not the placards. Was the information displayed for the voters correct and complete? And there should be a placard. There should be a blank protocol on the wall that indicates how many voters are registered there. That's the kind of information we're looking for. Inside the polling station. With the ballot papers, documentation, signed, marked, and stamped. Are the ballots correctly constructed? If you were in the first round, you know what the ballot looks like. It should have a stamp on it, and there should be a counterfoil. Insufficient or wrong ballot materials. Basically, every polling station that we saw had slightly more ballots than registered voters. It's possible that a polling station could have less ballots than registered voters, but it shouldn't be significant because there will not be 100% turnout. But in this case, whoever got the contract for ballot printing got a nice, juicy contract. Are the booths secret? The booths are kind of cheap. Sometimes the material is so thin you can basically see through it if there's a light that gives a silhouette. I mean, it is what it is, guys. I mean, it just is what it is. Is the ballot box sealed properly? Back to your question this morning. They should be sealed. In the first round, generally, the ballots were sealed with a plastic feed-through seal. Some of the urns didn't have the holes in them in the proper position. So people were having a lot of fun playing with children's scissors, trying to punch a hole through the urn to get a way to put the seal in there. There were cases where they didn't have the plastic seals, and paper is legal. It's not illegal. It's unusual, but it's not illegal. Good. Necessary election materials present, paper, pens, all the things they need. Was there a quorum? We discussed the number 9. Was the safe containing the ballot paper sealed? That should be sealed with a paper seal. 3 of them, 2 of them, 3 of them. Number of mobile voters listed, and you simply have to ask for this information. I usually try to ask for all my information at one time, just to be courteous to the chair. One thing important to note is that the chair, deputy chair, and secretary were computer generated. They didn't choose these jobs, and they weren't hired on an interview. So, sometimes we observe that there's other people in the commission that are more skilled than the people who are actually in charge. And in many cases, they really didn't want to be in charge, and the computer generated it. Am I on time, or keep going here? Disruption of polling stations. Again, this is a judgment call. If it's a disruption, then you're going to report it in the irregularity form. Scroll down. So here you can enter writing, anything you want to write. You can write poems, whatever. But again, irregularities to us are very specific. We've had all kinds of comments in the past. I've had comments, there are dogs barking outside. I can't do anything with this information. There are people standing around. Lots of people outside the polling station. In small villages, in some places, this is a big social event. And everybody will come out and hang out all day long because it's free entertainment. It's a great show. So irregularities are things that you don't expect. Scrolling down. I'm sorry?
So they can hang out there, but my understanding is that they cannot hang out inside the polling station, because a lot of times you'll see people come in and then they pull up a chair and sit and watch, or cool down or warm up or whatever they're doing.
No one can be in the polling station except voters and authorized individuals.
Well, after they voted, they have to leave though.
Yes. Yeah. You can't, I mean, people are going to say hello, they're going to see their friends. But I mean, if they're there for more than 20 minutes, something's really wrong, or they're bored. Maybe they should, they'll get a cup of coffee somewhere. Again, another place to put any details and comments you would like. And then finally, your overall impression. And again, we're using the international standards adopted by OSCE, adopted by European Parliament, Jimmy Carter's organization, all the organizations that are doing election observation in the world. And they use very bad, bad, good, and very good. What is the difference between very bad and bad? I'm not really sure. The longer I do this, I'm not 100% convinced what is very bad. If it's bad, I guess very bad to me, I would have to go back in my experience when people were so drunk they couldn't do this at all. Maybe that's very bad. Bad, again, if they can't count or they can't organize themselves or there's disruption. And the same thing with good and very good. These are judgment calls. For us, good and very good basically give us a statistical number that we're interested in. Bad and very bad also give us a statistical number. Then you push the button and submit. One more time, if you do not fill in every dialogue button, you will not be able to submit. At this time, you have to search for it. It won't find itself for you, right?
It marks the questions that were visited, but not answered. So, for example, if you go to some question that requires input and then do not enter anything and leave it, it marks that
That it's not filled.
that it's not
Yeah, this is
filled.
not an optional number. This has to be filled. Maybe that's what you were referencing. This one does require a number. We want to know how many mobile voters there are. Because if the number is 100, then it's strange. If the number is 6, it's not strange. But for information here, we don't have that. They don't have to write any information in. Basically, that's how the form looks for the rest of the day. Without abusing you, maybe quickly go through the closing form. I think the observation form itself has basically the same kinds of questions minus questions about opening.
Let me ask a group of questions. We can take a quick coffee break. There's little snacks and coffee break now, or do you want to go through the form and then break afterwards?
I think they went to break.
Want to break?
Break, or it doesn't make any difference to me. I'm good.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
That should do it. Right here at the table.
I mean, some of this stuff's a little, you have to go through it. There's no way to get a clear understanding unless you talk about it.
That's right.
There were two good questions I got at lunch. You first.
That are also, what circumstances would it be appropriate for them?
The question was about the police that are present at the polling station, depending on the physical condition of that polling station. Sometimes the police just could not get out of your way completely. This is not a violation. If there was a big room and they have some little room at the far end, they're not just going to shut the door and suffocate in there. They're going to probably leave the door open so they can try to breathe. So these are not violations. And the young lady's point about this question, there's a tool that we have discussed, and that tool is called common sense. Please apply that tool to your observation. As we usually say at the beginning of our briefing, all mistakes are not fraud, and all fraud is not a mistake. But in general, our key question is, are the elections fair, free, and transparent? Is what you're observing allowing the voters to express their will or not? Is there a disruption of that value? So a technical error, a simple mistake, it's a mistake. They're people. I make 20 mistakes a day. I hope none of them are really bad, but I do. So apply common sense throughout your experience and whatever you're doing with this mission. And did that help?
Mine was more general, based on the experience of people who've done this several times. What are the most common violations to look out for?
His comment is, what are the most common violations? Because he's a first-time observer. Congratulations, by the way. And thank you. And thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll try to go through the closing form because we have a limited amount of time, and that has some specific questions. And then is, can the PEC count? If they can, you'll have a nice evening. If the difficulty with that, either because of political problems or two things we want you to keep in mind. You're going to do an opening station, that polling station. So you'll have two observations done. You'll have your opening done, and then you observe that station as a PEC, as simply as a polling station. For closing, you should be at your closing station no later than 7:30 and do the reverse process. Observe that station as a PEC, as a polling station, from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. Then 8 o'clock, they're going to lock the door. You need to be inside. If you're not inside, you're not going to get in. Polling closes at 8. They should lock, and you theoretically are locked in at that point. So you need snacks, you need to bring water, you need to bring hot tea, whatever you think it will get you through the night. Toilet paper. These are all good things to have. A little bit, you don't need a lot. It depends, of course. But these may not be present at the polling station. Generally, Ukrainian people are extremely kind and very friendly. They will offer you tea and that sort of thing. I try not to have to take it, but if you do, you do. I mean, if it's a snack, but you don't want to start to mingle inside the process. Again, the same basic questions here. We're going to go through to get to the key points. The arrival of your team. So the closing, your arrival is at 8 o'clock. Right? The departure depends on how well things go. Now, in this case, number of voters registered, that was the number in the beginning. And then go back down. The number of voters who voted, that should be a finite number. This is important when it's closing. You're going to be asked this question throughout the day. Periodically during the day, the precinct commissions calculate the number of voters who voted. That's what you'll be asked during the day. What was it when they did that calculation? Now, this number is very important because obviously the numbers of voters who voted and the number of people registered are two important numbers for whether this is done correctly or not. Essentially, what you're looking for here is that the number of voters who voted, both mobile and in the station, plus the number of spoiled ballots, should equal the total number of ballots distributed minus the total deducted from the total number of voters in the station. If those numbers match, you're good. Or at least you got a shot. Then all you got to do is count them correctly. If those numbers don't match, that's where problems begin. Same questions about difficulty, access, intimidation, agitation, and disturbance. Again, people are very tired by the end of the day. You're tired and they're tired. They're more tired than you are. Scroll down. Again, how many members of the PEC? All the same type of questions here. Obviously, the station shouldn't be overcrowded at this point, and we'll probably make some correction on this question. Next. Were voters waiting to vote inside the polling station at 2000? Simple, straightforward. How many voters were in the station? Chances are there's not going to be anybody. But this could be a question, and this is a hot election. If yes, were they allowed to vote? If they're in the station, they should be allowed to vote. If they are in line outside of the station at 2000, they are also allowed to vote. Generally speaking, this story is over at 8 o'clock in general, but these are valid observation questions. When did the station close? It should close at 8 o'clock. Were the proper steps completed before the ballot boxes were open? They are to count the number of unused ballots, the number of used ballots, the number of spoiled ballots. They should destroy the unused ballots. They cut the corner off of the ballots with some device. Hopefully they have the correct device. We've seen everything. I've seen hatchets, hammers, and most often children's scissors. But they do have to destroy the corner of that ballot. And if that's not done, that's a real serious violation. That's how the problems can start. So these ballots have to be destroyed. That's really something you need to pay attention to. Were the control sheets in the ballot boxes? In the morning, they should place a control sheet in every urn. That's a sheet signed by all of the precinct commissioners that has the information about the polling station, the number, how many voters are registered, and all of that. That control sheet should still be in the urn at the end of the day, or it's not a valid urn. Were the seals still intact? Very simple question. Next. Ballot box stuffing. It's like carousel voting. You'll know it when you see it. Ballot box stuffing, if it happened, you'll see a group of ballots kind of stuck together, all folded, kind of in a group. This is strange, right? Because they go in one by one and they're kind of randomly. If you see ballots come out and it looks like a whole bunch are stuck together, you can be suspicious about ballot box stuffing. But when they stuffed ballots here, they did it in a much more direct way. So, yeah, I mean, they just added them. Theoretically, they should open each ballot like this and show it to everybody and call it out. One second. Frequently, this is a little bit difficult sometimes, and observers are there. All of those precinct commissioners are members of a political party. So they will pretty much not allow anybody to not give the correct answer at that point. So sometimes this is done correctly. Sometimes somebody just says, Poroshenko, Zelensky. I mean, it'll just go back and forth, and you'll have to observe that.
That question on the top right, was the choice on every ballot announced aloud? The word allowed, do you actually mean permitted, or do you mean spoken aloud?
Spoken aloud. Yeah, thank you for that. We will try to work on that question. Was the choice on every ballot announced aloud? It means, was it spoken out? It should be spoken out.
Allowed. It's a typo.
Yeah, it's a typo. Wrong aloud. Take note of that, Mr. Archeo. So nobody noticed it even till now, till today.
I did.
You did?
No,
No, because we know what it meant, right? Yeah. Yeah. Why didn't you tell me before? It's okay, I forgive you. Were you allowed to closely observe the counting? You can be up to, theoretically, by law, 2 meters from the table. Actually, you can probably get closer, but what you don't want to become is interfere. Don't interfere in this. Don't touch ballots. Do not touch. Yeah, it's a typo. Contested ballots. If ballots are spoiled, theoretically, the commission should reach consensus on whether this ballot should be permitted or not. They should hold it up. Every commissioner should look at it. What is a spoiled ballot? A ballot with a big X on it, or with both names checked, or with some nasty words, or Slava Ukraina. Anything that is not just a checkbox in that particular spot. That's a spoiled ballot. People write all kinds of messages in these situations. So the committee should then decide if this is an error or it's a spoiled ballot. They will make a consensus on that. Did the PEC have difficulty filling in the protocols? Again, this is by hand in this country. In Georgia, protocols are Xeroxed and stamped. The only valid protocol that the UCCA wants you to get is a protocol with a wet stamp. Again, a Xerox copy with a wet stamp to me is valid. But in general, what they have to do is middle-age style scribing. So one of the biggest problems with vote counting is while somebody's counting, somebody should be preparing protocols. If they don't do that in advance, then all that's got to be done when the counting's done, and you'll be there for another hour and a half. Did all the entitled persons receive copies of the protocol? Every observer has a right to a protocol. So you need to be sure that when the counting process starts, you request politely that you want a protocol before the day is over, and you should probably remind them once or twice, because otherwise they may forget about you. And I don't let them forget about me. And you have a right to a protocol, and they have a right to ask you to sign for it. Irregularities, just like you might note anywhere else. Details and one thing, up again, Artyom. Up. No, I'm sorry, the other way. You should be observing at least in a team of 2, and your observation is a consensus of the 2 of you. So if you have disagreements, you should try to work them out and come up with a unified observation. We can't have 2 of them. You can. Is that how you used to make decisions? Federal judge,
Yeah, he had the same thing.
Yeah. Now we know how it really takes place, right? Next. Details and comments. General impression. Very good means you're not there till 4 in the morning.
So,
Yes, sir.
if we're there, we empty the ballot box, and we see a roll of stuffed ballots, how do we approach this?
I would try to get as close to looking at that as you can to see if they all look like they were done by one person or uniformly. This is tough.
So besides photographing, can we ask them to spread them out or something? If we photograph each one of those, to see
You cannot photograph a completed ballot.
you know, we're counting.
You cannot photograph a completed ballot.
Can we photograph the fact that there was a stack of them together?
Yes.
From afar with
The question is about ballot stuffing for the people. We still have people online? Yes, we do. He said the question is if when they open the urn, it appears that there were stuffed ballots, can they photograph each individual ballot? We can't. The law is very clear that we cannot photograph completed ballots. The law is very clear about that.
Up to 3 years.
Prison in Ukraine is not very comfortable.
Actually, for a while. So if you photograph a ballot, you could be.
That's what he said.
He actually showed his ballot when he walked out who he voted for, and you're not supposed to do that. Leshkov. Who? Leshkov. So there's a case they filed against Leshkov. He could.
Anything can happen here. And again, your overall assessment. You can practice on the form now, today, tonight. If you haven't used it, practice. We're going to wipe the form clean, their database clean at 6 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, correct?
Yes.
So you have all this time to practice. Submitting, not submitting, finding the internet, not finding the internet. Yes, sir.
I didn't notice in the beginning, but as we do these surveys, it is not complete. I want to start another one. Is there a way of getting the form up, a clean form up?
You can open multiple tabs. You can open 40 of these, 50 of these, 60 of these. I think our
So in
server
other
will
words,
tolerate it, right?
Logistically, that's done by, you have to get another window.
Another
and then
window.
put in the address
Right.
again.
Another tab.
Your partner has
Yes.
a phone.
Yeah.
I mean, like on my iPad, what I'll do is I'll open up 10 windows
Yeah,
and just have them open before, so I know I already start.
yeah, I'm more worried about when if you don't have Wi-Fi, filling them out. So you would just, you would just put in the address and just,
Yeah. Copy and paste.
We had an issue at closing, and I wanted to ask you if that issue comes up again.
Go ahead.
All right. Our ballots never got taken to the deck.
That's nice.
And so because they never got picked up, we never got a wet stamp. We were there till 6 o'clock in the morning. They were calling they had no one to bring the ballots from the deck, from the PEC to the deck. And they were waiting for somebody to pick them up from 12:30 in the morning.
Liverpool did Depot.
Tak.
Nipro?
And this is Nipro. And so then my partner fell asleep, and then the head of the thing was calling the deck, and he was saying, oh, you don't understand Ukrainian, so I'll say it in English. You have to fix the numbers. And she said, the numbers are correct. We have observers and we have international observers, and they are correct. And I'm translating to Darren. Darren wakes up. He goes, fix what numbers? And so this was going on. Fix the numbers or we're not going to pick them up. So we realized they're not going to fix the numbers. They're not coming to get them. And it's 6 o'clock in the morning.
I'm assuming you gave them a bad report.
Yes, we submitted it to you.
Yeah, I mean,
That issue. That was the only issue we had all day.
the
And
que-
then, so we took the protocols without the wet stamp and left because it was a standstill.
yeah.
So
It'd be interesting.
what do you do?
Was there
Did we do
was
that
there a
correct?
final vote count on that?
Yes, I looked 2 days later and
Was that the same or was
yes,
it changed?
it was the same.
That's what you could do.
For the online people, the
Yeah.
comment was she had a very bad closing where they would not deliver. They should deliver, first of all, the ballot should be delivered by the chair, deputy, and secretary to the deck.
Yeah, and they didn't.
So it's the chair's responsibility to get from the polling station to the deck. The police are there to escort them so that they can go as fast as they want. I don't understand why they said nobody's to take us,
I don't
because
know.
that's not correct procedure, correct?
These elections did not offer any financial help to get the transport.
It's interesting. Her point was that they had no financing to be able to get themselves transported from the PEC to the deck. I mean, generally speaking, I guess somebody's supposed to have a car. And that probably was part of the responsibility of agreeing to be chair, is that you have transportation. They probably had to agree to that. I don't know.
Under that circumstance, all you could do is report it.
So we
Yeah.
reported it. We took our protocols. I still have mine. And
You can frame it. One of the things I would like to say, she brought up an important point. She was there till 6 o'clock in the morning. There is a physical limit to how long you can do this, and that's up to you. Again, we don't want to have an incident here. If you're just exhausted, you're exhausted. OSCE uses a standard of 3 a.m. But of course, they have another team to come behind them. We don't have that. That's the OSCE standard, just so you understand physically where you fit into this picture.
In that kind of situation, if we had a driver, could we offer to the people that we can take these people along with their freight in our car to the deck?
The question is, can we help them transport the ballots to the deck in our own transportation? And the answer is absolutely not.
No, you can't.
We cannot get involved with any, we cannot become part of the process. I understand it's a very genuine offer and a great idea. It would be helpful. If you stay behind, you can say, here's the car. You can tell the driver, if you have your own driver, you can release your driver from you and,
That's what I mean. I mean, not that I.
oh, give them over? I guess you
Give one
could.
driver, say, take them to the deck.
I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, because you're getting involved.
You're
Yeah, I
getting
wouldn't
into
do it.
muddy waters.
I suggest no.
So in the past, we've actually followed the car to the deck. Are we to follow the car to the deck?
Question is, are we to follow the car to the deck? That would be very ideal. And I mean, a lot of things can happen between the polling station and the deck, and a lot of things can happen at the deck. This is really, I mean, we're volunteers and we understand the physical limitations. If you're there until 6 o'clock in the morning, I doubt you're seriously going to go to the deck. If you're there at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm not sure you're going to the deck. It's up to you on your energy
But
level.
the other issue is if you have a copy of the protocol, I mean, so you got the vote count. You know, the next day we'll check it, or in 2 days we'll check it against the count at Central Elections Commission. It's the same, it's the same. If there's a discrepancy, well then, you know, that's materials we can turn as evidence.
And as Andre's pointing out, I don't think we have a single case where any of our observers reported a difference between their protocol and on the Central Election Commission site. Yes, sir.
Is it permissible for us to sign the protocol as observers?
Yes.
Yes?
Can you sign the protocol as an observer? Yes. Those are the two reasons you can sign. To register as an observer and to sign for the protocol. Yes, ma'am.
Question about the actual protocol itself. In previous years, it's been transported in a special envelope, which has had various colors, red, one blue, another, or both in some cases. And it's sealed, like, also the seal, which should stay in the polling station, has been seen at the decks. Because in the case of recounts and things like that.
Right.
So thinking from a sort of fraud point of view, if you're going to do it, things that you're going to use a few more envelopes that you really need and the seal.
Her question is, how are the protocols actually handled going from the PEC to the deck, and how are they packaged and so on? In this election, they were using green trash bags to pack everything. That was basically what they were using. And they were wrapping them up and taping them, and some envelopes. The key question is what Andre said. If we have a copy of the protocol, you're observing that station. Does that number match what shows up on the Central Election Commission 24 hours later? That's the key. Yes, sir.
In years past, we had a protocol of what are the steps in the voting at the beginning and at the end you're supposed to follow. Do we get that protocol again this year? Number one. Number two, as has happened at the closing, sometimes they will, for instance, open the ballot boxes and throw stuff on the table before they even count the unused ballots.
That would be a violation.
Exactly. So, but we can bring it to their attention, we can question them about if we have a protocol as to what are the steps. So do we have a protocol?
There is no diagram on the wall this time. The last presidential election, and I showed on the slideshow, there was a process map of some kind that no one could possibly have followed or even read. It was so poorly done. Basically, it still comes down to the number of ballots used plus the number of spoiled ballots minus the total number of ballots received by the station and total number of voters registered. Do those numbers coincide? That's the key.
But you're asking specifically, we have a diagram. I remember, it used to be like 100 boxes or something, wasn't it?
It was a
Multicolored.
multicolored with arrows that no one could read.
Was it helpful?
Oh, you,
I mean, in Hebron, we were at the closing station and they were all over the place. So we went to the chairwoman and said, this is the
Is
way.
that something we can pull up and email to them, or?
I don't even know if it exists. I can see.
We'll take a look. If it's something that exists.
I have a diagram. Yes, I do have a diagram we can send.
Okay, well,
broken the boxes, time they counted the unused, time they did, and it was just a nice flow. And then all of a sudden they're jumping to another step, and you're going like, wait a minute, they skipped, and so they themselves sometimes are confused which route to go.
Again, keep in mind the chair, deputy chair, and secretary are computer-generated individuals.
Right, yeah, so exactly, somebody else might, and so we had this flow sheet and they were looking at this and they go, oh, well,
I'll find the diagram. I will send it to you.
Send it to me and then I'll email it to them.
You can maybe email it to everybody.
Everybody.
It
What
would be
I'll do is
helpful.
we'll send it to Tamara. Tamara's got everybody's email address and I'll answer it.
So by Sunday, they'll have it.
Yeah, yes.
Can we have your phone numbers?
Absolutely.
That was actually one of my questions.
I thought the numbers are on the,
They should be, in the handbook that you got from Tamara email.
Let me see, could put my number.
Do you want to know it? Just because we're all here.
Just tell us.
I can,
Okay, local number, mine,
but she's got better handwriting.
097-339-9826.
We'll put it right,
That's Lee, right?
Andrei.
Okay.
If you're using
Plus,
another application like
380.
WhatsApp or Telegram or
plus
Signal,
380.
my US number is 440-785-3354.
Is that like a regular American number?
Yeah.
Oh, do it
And
again.
Andre, what's your number? Put on,
440-785-3354.
Yeah, Yeah.
you got that, Larry?
Use 97-339-9826.
Same number as before, Andre?
Yes.
and yours? Do we just need Andrew's number or yours
No,
too?
there is.
No, it's right up there.
They're right there. You can have both.
Who's Reno's?
Oh,
You can call and wish me happy Easter.
In theory,
that's true, you have Easter's.
Yeah.
We have Palm Sunday.
Right. Religious holiday for everybody.
Rena,
Yes.
in theory, wherever there's a precinct, we could go, a couple of us, went to a prison once, and, you go through whatever, and so the thing applies to military as well as prisons, etc.
Hospitals, yeah, all the rules are the same. We did visit a eye hospital, right? And they had very few voters. And they had very few voters. They had a small commission. And they were basically done. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. There was nobody left to vote. I mean, everybody who was going to vote had voted. They were bored to tears.
Can we have one more number? Can we remember to, I'm gonna guess either VICA or, just for logistics, like, if there's logistical problems, we're not gonna call you. Or we
Where'd she go?
Vika would love to have her number distributed so everybody will call her. She will love this.
Vika, Hoopska.
We said maybe you can.
Are you going to share with us the precinct list, or how do we get these?
That's out of my pay grade, but I'm assuming
Okay, that's
somebody
what I-
has this.
I got that question. What is?
Any other questions on the procedure, and then I'm
Yeah,
out of the picture.
procedure. Anything on procedure? Anything you know?
I'm assuming they vote right there. Yeah, they can't move. I think they vote right at that commission. They sh-
The actual commission members?
Yes.
I would assume they vote.
That's an assumption, I'm assuming.
They've moved around since.
Yeah.
Does anyone plan to visit the CEC during the day to see what's happening there?
Sounds like a mission for you.
Well, I plan to do that.
We did last, I don't think we did that first round. I don't.
I was in Odessa.
I wasn't, yeah, I don't know.
All right.
It sounds like a mission for
Well,
the
we have
judge.
several people based out of here,
The motto was. Procedurally, anything more from Reno?
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Reno.
You're welcome.
By the way, big thank you to Reno.
at a time they put this entire system together. So thank you very much.
Yeah, he-
I'll continue, but this is logistics now, so I think we can
Sign off.
Sign off.
who's going, the Odessa people, I want to connect you with George before you
Okay,
leave.
the other thing is whoever's coming back to Cape,
Thank you, everybody.